Good morning.
Good morning, Ramesh. Where's where are you today?
No, I'm still babysitting. I will leave tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not easy. It's not easy being a grandparent.
Yeah, yeah,
Hard work.
yeah.
Mhm.
So my grandmother would say that being a grandparent is you get the nachas without the responsibility. And every
Yeah,
once
but
in a
now,
while, I have the responsibility too.
yeah.
Let's see. We left off. Where were we holding? Do you have it? That's
We're
what.
three lines from the bottom.
Oh, Amar Mar on 115, right? 115b. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, so that's Kuftas Vav on base, three lines from the bottom. Thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. It's supposed to our learning, we should have the base of Migdash immediately. What's going on?
3 o'clock in the morning from indigestion. I turned on my computer and I another dot. So I'm now up to almost the end of 170.
Oh,
I
so
said, I'm out of my mind doing this.
yeah,
3 o'clock in the morning.
finishing the Masechta this week. We should discuss the scene, but later on we'll figure out what we'll do. Okay. Amar Mar. Amar Mar. Master Chuck. We learned to Amar Mar means we learned in a brisa previously. Kol Kshem Lahakriv. We said that before the Mishkan was built, Hakol Kshem Lahakriv means they were allowed to offer any type of sacrifice. Yeah. How do we know this? That on a bama, on a private altar before the Mishkan, they were allowed to offer anything. Well, Amar Ravuna says Amakra. We have a pasuk. It says that after the Mabul, even Noach Mizbeach Lashem, Noach built an altar. V'yikach mikol behemat mikol efatar, and Noach, and he took from all of the kosher animals, all the kosher birds. And when it says the word behema, kimashmai, behema of course means an animal. However, chaya b'chal behema. We know that wild animals are included in the name animal, because animal is more of a general term. So obviously they were allowed to bring chayas on the mizbeach. It says behema. And what's the source? Maybe what would it say if it was only behema? It'd probably say bakar or something. It would have to be more specific. If you use the general term behema, it means everything. Okay.
The number of animals.
Yeah. No, it says behema tahira. It says not tahira. Here it just says all the behema that's tahir, all the pure ones. Right. So he took this is his sacrifice. However, it goes on. It says zecharim and akevas tmim and bali mumim. Specifically, male, female, whether it had a blemish or did not have a blemish or it was perfect, that could be brought as an offering. Now, there's a parenthesis here that the Shittim Kvetza says to skip, and it says lafuke, but what is this coming to exclude? Mechusar Ever Deloy. It's missing a limb that can't be brought as a sacrifice. The Amar Rabbi Lazar, because Rabbi Lazar says, have here, Rabbi Lazar, say, how do we know that an animal that's missing a limb is prohibited for Benach to bring us a sacrifice? Talmud Laimar, plus it says, Mikol achai, mikol basar, from all the living, from all flesh. It says he would bring two. He would bring two into the teva. Amra Torah havi behema shechayin rashe yavarm shalah. You have to bring in animals that have all of their extremities are intact, all the tips of the limbs, because
Excuse me for asking. So if you person at that time, then it's technically one of its limbs, even though its attached was kind of invalid. Strange question. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Never mind.
Dr. Stein is telling me about a Bempikua over here.
It's one of the lips.
We've been hearing about a Ben Pekor for 7 years.
I love that.
Okay. Vidilma. So what do we see is that because the what needed to come into the teva needed to have all its extremities intact. And what was the reason for that? Because when it was going to come out, we needed to have for a sacrifice. Because for a sacrifice, it would need to have everything intact. I'm sorry? Ben Pekor. Because when you shecht an animal, if inside the mother you find a fetus that's still alive. The Dilma, the Gemara.
Ben Pekor was the one that stuck out.
Or it had a hand that was in that discussion. If there's a hand sticking out, that hand it wouldn't be the shechita doesn't help for that hand. The mother shechita. Yeah.
That's what I was referring to.
Okay, I got it. Dilma lemute treifa. Maybe it's coming to exclude an animal that has some sort of problem that's going to die. However, mechosarever, just because it's missing a piece of its arm or leg, that shouldn't invalidate it. Yeah, it hops around. It says ahu this in the pasuk. It says that what he takes onto the teva. It says that he takes on lahachyes. No, it doesn't say. It says hachyes zera. What's the pasuk lahachyes zera? Do you have the which pasuk it is? What we said before. So it's Genesis 19. Yes, over here it says, I will set up my covenant with you. From every living and from all flesh, you should bring 2 of each species into that to keep alive with you. Oh, to keep alive. It says, lahachiyos itach. That's not lahachiyos zera. Where's the pasuk lahachiyos zera? Oh, in 7:3. In 7:3 it says, also the birds of the skies that are pure take 7 pairs, male and female, to keep their seed alive upon the face of the earth. It says, lahachiyos zera. Oh, coming to teach me that what animals were taken onto the teva, only animals that can have seed, that can reproduce, which means not a treifa. So I know already not a treifa. So what are we going to learn from mikol achai, mikol basar? That we're going to learn that all the basar needs to be intact. Because if it's just to tell me not a treifa, that I know from lahachiyos zera. The Gemara says, that only fits according to one opinion. That says that the rule is that a treifa animal or a bird cannot reproduce. But according to that other opinion that says that a treifa animal can reproduce, so then I don't know a treifa from lahachiyos zera because a treifa can reproduce. So I would need to know treifa from mikol basar. So then how do I know mechosarever? So the Gemara answers, Amar kra itach. For this I have an answer. It says with you. Lahachiyos itach. This is going back to the one that you quoted, 6:19. It says b'day melach. It has to be similar to Noach. Bringing the animals with you means similar to you. Just like Noach wasn't missing any limbs, so too the animals can't be missing limbs because the carbon that they're going to bring from later isn't missing limbs. How do you know? Maybe Noach was a treifa. You have to check the movie. It was. It says tamim ksive. It says that Noach was perfect, right? It says v'dilma tamim b'drachav. Perfect doesn't mean that his body was perfect. Perfect means that he was perfect in his actions. It says no, for that tzaddik sibbe. We already said he's a tzaddik. It says v'dilma tamim b'drachav tzaddik b'maisav. Maybe tamim b'drachav means that he had good character, and tzaddik means in his actions. But how do you know he wasn't a treifa? Maybe it's all talking about just his character, right? Isal kadaitach denayach gufei treifa have. if he would say that Noach was a treifa, Mika Amalei Noach the Kavasecha Ayel Shlamim Leit Ayel Shlamim Shlamim. If you would say that Noach was yes a treifa, so Hashem tells him that you should bring in animals that are similar to you, but not you shouldn't bring in perfect animals. It wouldn't make sense. Obviously, Noach was not a treifa. It says Itach to tell you that you don't bring in anything that's a treifa. You don't bring in. Tell you that you don't bring in anything that's a treifa. You don't bring in a treifa. And machas reiva, I'm gonna go back to mikol basar. Okay. Okay, so if you use the word itach to tell me that's similar to nayach is what you're going to bring into the teva, those animals that are not blemished. So then, lahachi zera lamalis. Why do I need that pasuk that says to keep alive, to keep the seed alive, right? Why do I need that pasuk? It says ma'odatem itach because I could have thought itach l'tzav ba'alma. Could have thought that the purpose of bringing in the animals was not because they actually needed to be similar to Noach in their perfection, but rather it's to keep Noach company. The Noach should have a lot of pets in the teva. It's going to be stuck there for 18 months. No, it was only 12 months, right? So, afilu zaken, afilu saris, but it doesn't matter what you bring in as long as it's going to keep Noach company. Kamash Malan, it comes to tell me that no. Purpose of bringing it on was not just to keep the Noach company, to have pets, teddy bears, but it should be to be able to keep alive the seed for afterwards.
He had his family.
I know, but family wasn't enough. You need some.
Well, family causes strife. Therefore, get the dog that's unconditional love. It's right by a line.
So the sign that it says, "We treat our customers like family." And then you see what the person says. I don't think I'm going in there. Let's see. Zahirin avalait tmein. Zahirin avalait tmein. It says that what type of animals were you allowed to bring? It says only the pure animals, but not the non-kosher. Was there such a concept of kosher animals and non-kosher animals in the time of Noach? Wasn't even the Torah wasn't given. When it says tahira, it means that no sin was performed with them. It doesn't mean tahira that it's permissible to eat. It means that it wasn't corrupted. How would they know if an avera was done with it? Rav Chisda says haviran lifnei teva. They brought it in front of the teva. Kol teva kalata midush v'tar. If the teva, the ark, would absorb it, then we knew that no avera was done. If it just can't make its way in, it tries to, every time it tries to go in, something like zaps it or something, doesn't get in. We do a shein tmei, and we know that an avera was done. Rabbav Amar Kra Abayim Zacher Nekeva Abayim Eileim. It says those that came, male and female. It sounds like Haboy, and those that came, sounds like they came on their own. So the ones that came, Noach knew, were the tar ones. Now, is Rabbav following that we're not dealing with actually kosher, we're dealing with ones that didn't avera? See, Rashi and Chumash doesn't say this. Rashi says that Malame, this teaches us that Noach studied the Torah. We know that. But according to this Gemara, it has nothing to do with the kosher laws, the kosher dietary laws. It has to do with the animals that sin. Unless, according to Rabbi Vo, when he's saying Zachar Nekivim Habayim Eileim, that would teach him not that who did the Aver, but that would teach him which ones are going to be kosher later. It doesn't sound like that. Okay, Amar Mar. Yeah? What do they comment over there? Anything? Super commentaries. Super commentaries means commentaries on commentaries. Okay. I remember.
Wives.
Huh?
Wives.
What does that mean?
Wives. Whatever you say, your wife doesn't count. They know better. If you don't think so, ask your wife.
Right. Amar Mar, Master taught Hakol Karvo Oilas. Before the Mishkan and they had private altars, everything was brought as an Oila. Oilas in, Shlamim Lai. Sounds like only Oilas, but not peace offerings. Vaksiv, the problem with this is that we have a pasuk before the by the giving of the Torah before the Mishkan was set up. It says, "Vayizbechu Zavachim Shlamim Lashem Parim." This is when the lads of the Bnei Yisrael went. They had this quoted this pasuk before, and they brought up oilas and they slaughtered suffering. They slaughtered offerings, peace offerings to Hashem, parim, cows. So we see that they had before the Mishkan they were offering shlamim because it says vachim, elaima hakol karbo oilas. Rather, everyone would bring oilas. Ushlamim. There's a question if you have supposed to have this brackets over here. The Shita Mekubetzes takes it out. Oilas in shlamim lai. That means only oilas, but not peace offerings. So what does it mean that they brought the zvachim? Command Amar like karbu shlamim l'bnei nayach. There's a detail here that's not being said. The detail is that when it comes to Bnei Nayach, you're right, they can only bring oilas. But Yisrael, Jewish people could bring shlamim as well. Command Amar like cover shlamim l'bnei Nayach. Bnei Nayach, you see, so the critical time over here was not the Mishkan that allowed the shlamim. The critical time was the giving of the Torah when the Jewish people went from Bnei Nayach to Bnei Yisrael. Once they switched to Bnei Yisrael, then they were allowed to bring shlamim. So it says, Command Amar like cover shlamim l'bnei Nayach. The Bnei Nayach didn't bring shlamim. Ditmar Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. These two sages in Eretz Yisrael, students of Rabbi Yochanan, that the shlamim, the Bnei Nayach don't bring peace offerings. My time at the mandam recover shlamim Bnei Nayach. What's the source for the opinion that holds that Bnei Nayach, Noachites, are allowed to bring a shlamim, a peace offering? The Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, that Hevel brought also a sacrifice. And he brought from the first sheep and from their fat. What does it mean from their fat? It means that he brought the fat on the altar. So what would be something that the fat is brought on the altar, but you don't bring all the flesh on the mizbeach? So you see that from the fact that it says that Hevel brought the fat, that means that he brought the fat, but not the rest of the animal. What's with the rest of the animal? The rest of the animal they ate. That's a shlamim sacrifice, not an oila sacrifice. So you see that the Bnei Nayach were bringing shlamim. My time, the mandam alay karva. What's the source? The opinion that says that Bnei Nayach don't bring shlamim. They can only bring oilas. It says the Ksiv. We quote a pasuk from Shir Shirim. It says Uri tzafan abayit Teman. Wake up north and come. The Teman is the west. Tisnar Uma Shemasebet Safan. Shake off the nation that its actions are on the north. Now, what is the actions on the north? That's referring to the oilo that was slaughtered on the north. Now, it's referring to the actions on the north are referring to the oilas, right? Which nation can only bring an oila? That means the non-Jews are only allowed to bring, in other words, before the giving of the Torah, or maybe just Bnei Nayach are only allowed to bring oilas. They're not allowed to bring shlamim. So shake off the nations that their actions are on the north, which means oilas, and bring in and let come the nation that its actions are in the north and the south. What is that? That's the Jewish people that can bring oilas and shlamim. So this is a source based on this pasuk in Shir Shirim that the Bnei Nayach don't bring shlamim. Umar nami ksiv mechel ve'em. What does he do with the pasuk that Hevel brought a shlamim? It says, it doesn't mean Michalveim, but Michalveim means Mishmaneim Dedu. Means he brought the best of his sheep. It doesn't mean the fat. It means the fattest ones. It doesn't mean the fat of the sheep. It means the fattest of the sheep. Marnami Yaksivuri Tzafan. What does that other opinion do that says that the nations only bring oilas? That's not referring to the sacrifices. That's referring to the ingathering of the exiles. Let the wind of the north come, and let the wind of the south come. It's not referring to the sacrifices that are brought on the north of the altar or the south of the altar. What did Moshe tell Parai when he said that you're going to give us sacrifices yourself that we're going to offer to our God? And in that list that Moshe was saying what you're going to give us, he says you're going to give us zvachim va'olas. Zvachim means shlamim, right? So that means that the non-Jews are going to bring shlamim, and that was before the giving of the Torah. So the Gemara says zvachim la'achil oilas la'krava. No, what he meant was zvachim doesn't have to mean shlamim. Zvachim could also mean like Maseches Zavachim. Well, zvachim means sacrifices in Maseches Zavachim, but it could mean shchita. You're going to give us meat for barbecues. And then we're also going to have oilas. You're going to give us meat, and you're going to give us oilas sacrifices. We'll have both. But not that that non-Jews are going to send shlamim. Vaksiv. We have a pasuk that says, Vikach Yisrei Chesed Moshe Elu Zvachim, that Yisrei, the Moshe's father-in-law, took burnt offerings and peace offerings. Now, when did Yisrei come? Yisrei came, according to one opinion, before the giving of the Torah. So the Gemara says, this is talking about that it was after the giving of the Torah. This works out well according to the opinion that says Yisrei Matan Torah, that Yisrei came after Matan Torah. But according to the one that says Yisrei came Matan Torah, what are you going to say? It says apparently Yisrei was bringing shlamim before the giving of the Torah, and that wasn't allowed. Ditmar, because we have a statement, Machlekes Amirayim, Bnei Reb Chia, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, they argued, these two sages, Rabbi Shua ben Levi with the sons of Reb Chia. Reb Chia was Yehuda and Chizkiah. It says, Chadamar Yisrei Kaidem Matan Torah. One says Yisrei came before Matan Torah, Chadamar Yisrei Achar Matan Torah. So Lamandam Yisrei Kaidem Matan Torah, Ksaver Shlam Mekriv Bnei Noach. The Gemara says, so the way we're going to have to work this out, we're going to say that the opinion that holds that Yisrei came before Matan Torah, turns out that Yisrei was offering shlamim. Says, yeah, because that opinion holds that you're allowed to bring, that the Bnei Noach are allowed to bring shlamim. The other opinion that holds Bnei Noach are not allowed to bring shlamim, well, that Yisrei came after Matan Torah. So that matches perfectly.
What do you mean, quote unquote, came to bring the korban?
Yeah. When did Yisrei arrive in the desert? To bring Moshe's family and to visit.
That was before Matan Torah.
How do you know?
But because Moshe got married to Tzipora, and that whole story and the burning bush was before Matan Torah.
Yisrei shows up later in Parshas Yisrei. After Moshe goes back and he does all the miracles, he takes the Jewish people out, splits the sea. And they're in the desert, and then they have a guest. Yisrei appears. Moshe had left his wife, kids, back in Midian. Now this guest appears with Moshe's wife, and he gives Moshe.
His father-in-law set him up. He said, "Here's Tzipora, my daughter."
Yeah, they were married. He was married already, but he left.
He wasn't there.
1 second. Yes, Moshe marries Tzipora in Midian.
Right.
Then he gets sent back to Hashem sends him back to Egypt. He does all the miracles. He takes them out. Where's his wife and kids in Yisrael then? And they're in Midian. They're not there. Then the Jewish people are in the desert now. They have a visitor. Yisrael appears. Now, when did Yisrael come? Was it before the giving of the Torah? Was after? We know that it says that Yisrael gave them advice on how to how to manage this large group of people, to make different people in charge of different things. And that was talking about after Yom Kippur, right? After Yom Kippur means that it's after Matan Torah. The question is, did he only arrive then, or did he arrive earlier? Or we know that advice had to do with Moshe was teaching the Torah. When he comes down after Yom Kippur, he was telling them the halachas, and he had to divide it up, like to delegate this the judgment. So there's two opinions here. One opinion says Yisra appears, he comes in before Matan Torah. One says after Matan Torah. One says Kitanai is actually Machlaikas. We're thinking it's no. This is when he arrived. Yeah. The question is it before the giving of the Torah? Was it after? Because he was there for a while.
When did he convert? After the giving of the Torah. If you say it was
Everyone
after the
converted
giving of
after
the
the
Torah,
Torah.
then
Well, we know that he went back at a certain point. Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, "Stay with us." He says, "No, I'm going back."
going back to
Midian. We know that he
it
said that.
doesn't mean he wasn't having converted.
Right, he converted.
So if he converted, how do we?
I guess what you're asking is that even if Yisra came before Matan Torah, maybe these sacrifices were brought after Matan Torah. That's what he asked. Okay, yeah, the Gemara doesn't get into that, but maybe there's commentary here. What's that? This thing,
It's not quite more. They ask him questions that like everyone else.
Kitanai, it's Machlekes Tanai. We have a brisa. It says, "V'yishma Yisra kayin Midian." Yisra, the priest of Midian, hears. Mashma Shama Abba. What did he hear that drew him to come to the Jewish people? This is what they ask. What did you come? Why are you here in the best? And what brought you here to convert? Above in the sky, are you coming to convert? Rabbi Yeshua Aimer, Yeshua says, "L'chemes Amalek Shama Sherikas Betzidai Yachlis Yeshua Amalek V'Samalek Ficharim." He heard about the war with Amalek because right next to the Yisra it says that Yeshua weakened Amalek and his nation by the sword. Rabbi Lazar Midai Aimer, Rabbi Lazar Midai is not so common in the Gemara. He says, "Matayra Shama Ba." Said he heard about the giving of the Torah. Kashenit Natar Yisrael. When the Torah was given, the voice of Hashem went from one end of the world to the other. All the kings of the non-Jewish kings, the idolatrous kings, they were trembling in their rooms, in their palaces. And they sang a song. Covered. And in the palace of each of the kings, they gave praise to Hashem. They all come to Bilam, find out what's going on. Just like turning on their radio. They said, what is this sound that we're hearing? Maybe there's another flood. Hashem says, don't worry about floods. It says Hashem's not doing those anymore. Bilam says, "Oh, Hashem lamam b'yashav amalehem." That's basically. Vayeshav Hashem melech la'olam. Kvar nishba kadosh baruch hu she'enim mevi ma b'la'olam. Hashem already swore He's not doing that anymore. Amrulai, so they said to Bilam, "Mabel shalmayim enim mevi." He's not bringing a flood, but avol mabel shalish maybe He's going to bring a storm of fire. Nemar kihine beish Hashem nishba. It says that Hashem will judge with fire. It says Amalehem kvar nishba she'enim mashchas kol basis. Hashem said He's not going to destroy the entire world, whether through water, whether through fire. So what's this big sound that we heard? Hashem says, I'm sorry. He said that Hashem has this treasure, the base Gnazav in his storage house. That it was hidden away for 974 years before the world was created.
Why are they asking? Why did he come?
What did he see from Hashem's greatness? Did he see the war of? Did he hear about the war of?
It sounded like he was very knowledgeable when Pharaoh asked him, like, what they asked his advisors. He was the only one that spoke public. He said, like, don't touch me.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that he heard it. You see, there's a word here. We could have learned this. what caused Yisrael to show up in the desert? But it says no. What caused Yisrael to show up and to convert? So what happened before was that he rejected this idol and that idol and other idols. In other words, he was like excommunicated from his community. It says rejecting the idols. But it doesn't mean he was joining the Jewish people. What caused him to join the Jewish people? So it's machlokes. If he saw this miracle or that miracle, whatever the case is, now he says that Bilam tells the people that Hashem has a treasure, that it was hidden away for 974 generations. Why specifically 974? Because there's another 26 generations from Adam until Moshe, 26 generations, the giving of the Torah. So, and that's what it means. It says that the Torah is 1,000 generations. 1,000 generations it was kept before it was given. 974 before the world was created. I don't know how that's considered generations, but whatever the case is. And then there's 26 after the world was created. And he was giving it to his sons. Shnemar, Hashem Oiz Lama Yitin. Hashem is giving the Jewish people strength. And what's the strength? The strength is the Torah. Miyad Pasuk Kulam Amra, they all said Hashem Yavarech Hashem Bashalom. Hashem should bless his people, his nation with peace. Rabbi Lezer says, so far we have two opinions. Rabbi Yeshua, that says the war of Yeshua with the Malach. That's easy to remember, right? Because Rabbi Yeshua is the one that talks about Yeshua. Rabbi Lezer Midai, he's the one that tells us about Matan Torah. Now we have Rabbi Eliezer, which is Rabbi Lezer ben Hurkanes. Rabbi Lezer ben Hurkanes says, Kriyas Yamsuf Shamaba. Says, you heard about the splitting of the sea. Nemar, it says, Vikashmei Kamalchei Amayri. This is the conversation that Rachav has with the spies that came to when all the kings of Amayri heard about what Hashem did to the Yarden, so their hearts melted. Even Rachav, the Zaina, says to the messengers of Yeshua, which are Kalev and Pinchas, right, the spies, okay. So we see that everyone heard about the splitting of the sea. So that's probably what drew Yisrael to come. Maishna Hasam, Damar, Maishna Hasam, Damar Lei, Diksiv, Leihaya Bem Aidruach. What's the difference by it says Malchi Amayri? Let me just see where this is. Tesvav. Yeah, over there it says that they didn't have any more spirit. And then when Rachav said it to them, she said, there was no spirit left in man. The Gemara explains that what Rachav meant, they weren't able to have erection for their to procreate. How does Rachav know what's going on by all the men? Damar, because it says, the Medrash tells us, there was no minister or what's a minister, another type of minister. That didn't live with Rachav Azayna. She was the dressmaker.
Dressmaker of the entire generation.
So Amru Bas Eser Shanim Haisa Kishyatz Yisrael Mitzrayim. Rachav was 10 years old when the Jewish people left Egypt. And for 40 years she was living that lifestyle. And after she's 50 years old, she decides to convert. Amra Yehimachali B'schar Chevel B'chaleinu Pishtim. Because I saved the Meraglim by hiding them. I saved Kalev and Pinchas by hiding them amongst the flax on the roof, and also by letting them out of the window with the rope. So that should atone for all the times that she hid the people that came to see her with in the Pishtim, and also had to have them climb up through the. It's
like Bolo Kachpoto. She used the same stuff that she did the Averis with.
Right.
she obviously.
Right. She marries Yeshua, right?
Oh man, she was the first lady.
Yeah. Amar Mar.
They used to call her Melania.
Amar Mar.
What do you mean? They changed her name. Why would she still have the same name?
Can't
She had to have a
compare.
new name.
I can't compare.
But she had to have a new name. Why would we still refer to her with the same name?
Question.
Name.
That's a good question. Amar Mar. The master taught, we learned in the Brisa that non-Jews are allowed to bring sacrifices on the Bama. How do we know this? Tana Rabbanu was taught in the Brisa, Dabra B'nai Yisrael, when it talks about the laws of not bringing sacrifices outside the temple, it says, speak to the Jewish people. It's only the Jewish people that are restricted from bringing sacrifices outside the temple. Everyone could make their own altar, and they could bring up whatever they want. Yeah, it's all good. So, Amr Rabbi Yaakov Barach, Amr Rabasi, Rabbi Yaakov Barach says in the name of Rabasi, Aser L'Sayan, that a non-Jew that's going to decide to bring a sacrifice in his backyard, on his backyard bama, this is something Walmart could sell, you're not allowed to support, you're not allowed to give them assistance. A Jew is not allowed to assist them in this. Lashes Lichusam, or to bring it in the Shlichus. I'm not really doing this, I'm just the Shliach from the guy. He's not allowed to do that. That would be a prohibition. Amarabba, well, Shari, but he's allowed to teach him how to offer it. Allowed to teach him the laws. You just can't assist him in the actual doing.
So the Ifrahim a bummer guy. A Shabbos guy. You can't be a bummer guy.
Yeah, the mama. Jeff is telling me about Alabama. Okay. You heard the Ifra Hormuz, Amy the Shramarka. There was a woman, queen, name was Ifra Hormuz, where it tells us that she had the beauty of demons. I didn't know that was beautiful, but whatever the case is, she was the mother of Shvar Malka. Shadja Kabana Rava. She sent the carbon to Rava. It says actually it was a type of calf. Igla Tilsos, like the third born calf. So Rava sends to her, Askuan Ale, L'Shem Shemayim. So bring it as a sacrifice to Hashem. Amlu Rav Safra. Rava says to Rav Safra, Rav Acha Barhuna, Zila V'Dabru. Go and get Trey Olmi Guloi. Two, they would say in England, yucks. Two non-Jewish men to bring this sacrifice. Find a place that's a dry place near the ocean. Yeah, somewhere near the ocean, you find a dry spot. And take new wood, and make a fire out of it.
No, he wanted near the ocean because the new sand is coming. Everything new.
Right, everything has to be new. Yeah. And mamri chadata with new vessels. Get the fire out of the new vessels. Vaskun ale l'shem shemayim, and bring the sacrifice for l'shem shemayim. So, which means that you're allowed to teach the non-Jew how to do it, but you're just not allowed to assist them. Amalei Abayas says to Rava, come on, according to which opinion are you requiring that the wood can't be used before? It says Rabbi Lazar ben Shmuel, the Tanya Rabbi Lazar ben Shmuel, Rabbi Lazar ben Shmuel says this is Rabbi Lazar. In the Mishnah it says Mam is when he brings a sacrifice on the altar, it has to be something that was never used before. It has to be wood that wasn't used before. You can't bring an old bed frame and burn that. It has to be new wood. But Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel by Abama holds that it's not necessary to have new wood. The Tanya Kasav Achadaimer, it says in one pasuk in Divrei Yamim, it says regarding the David bought the granary from Aravna, which is the place in Yerushalayim. It says Vayitin David la Arnon, supposed to be la Aravna, v'makim shiklei zav mishkal sheish meyas. It says gave him in place of what's the full verse? I don't have. Oh, maybe I have the full verse here. 1 second.
That's the first.
Okay, that's all pasuk. They gave him the weight of 600 coins. And then it says in Shmuel, and not in that pasuk that we quoted was from Chronicles, from Divrei Yamim. In Shmuel it says, "Vayikin David asagayren." David acquires the granary. Vesabakar bekesef shkalim chamishim. He acquires it with 50 coins. So what was it? Was it 50 coins or was it 600 coins? Okay, tzad. Gave him called shevet v'shevet chamishim. Shehein sheishmeis. If he takes 50 coins from each tribe, then he's going to end up with 600, right? Because it's 12 tribes. 12 times 5 would be 600.
Yeah, but that's not answering the question. Because first it said
1 second.
Shiklei Zahav.
Oh, so 1 second. The Gemara is going to mention that in a minute. Rabbi Yomer Mishum Abba Yosi ben Destoi Bakar ve'etzim umakim mizbeach, the cattle, the wood in the place of the altar binun. That was the 50 coins. That's talking about in Sefer Shmuel. Kol habayis kulai, but the whole base of Mikdash, that was b'sheish meis. That means the whole area was 600 coins. Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel says Bakar ve'etzim umakim mizbeach binun. And kulai b'sheish meis. Diksiv v'yemer Rav Nel David. So 1 second. So what's the difference between Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel and Rebbe? Bakar eitzim umakim mizbeach binun. Kolabayis kulai is b'sheish meis. Diksiv v'yemer Rav Nel David. Oh, the Gemara is going to ask what's the difference. V'yemer Ravna al David yikach bayal adeni hamelech hatev beinav rei abakar la'ila v'amerigim makli abakar le'etzim. Says Ravna says to David that my master should be good in his eyes. He should take the cattle, that he should take that as sacrifices, and the vessels that come along with it, and the ropes that should be for the that should be used for wood. Means that he's not using new things for wood. You see that when it comes to the firewood for a bama, you don't need something new. It's a question on who said that it needs to be new. And Rabbah said that it needs to be new. Question from Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel on Rabbah that said that it needs to be. Rabbi Elazar says that it doesn't need to be new, right? Rav Malach, or maybe it's Rabbah. Rabbah would say to you, "Asam nami bechadati." Over there, when it says that you're going to use these vessels, it's talking about that those were brand new vessels. My merigim, what are the merigim? Amrula mita shel turbal. It's a bed of turbal. My mita shel turbal. What's a bed of turbal? Amrabaya Iza de kurkasa. Iza is a goat in kurkasa. How do they translate kurkasa? The goat-shaped tool. It's hooks. The daish and disha. But they use it to put it on the floor to do the threshing.
Oh, maybe it's showing that like a goat has, their horns going up like this. So if you turn that upside down, it's like hooks, and then they should schlep it.
What do they call the shoes that they wear when they play soccer? Cleats. Cleats. I think it's like something like cleats.
Cleats.
And they would use this because they wanted to, when they would trample on the grain to break it up, break off the chaff. So they would put this down and the animal would walk in it. I think that's what it is. Amar Abaya Mikra. Where do you get this from? That Moirig is made out of these indents and protrusions. It says in Yeshaya that I've made you for a new moirig that does new scratches that has openings. Okay, whatever the case is, it's something that could cause scratches. Makri le Rava the Bray. Rava was learning with his son, Brahma Kroya Dadi, and he had this contradiction between the psukim. It says one ksiv Eaton David la Arna la Aravna. It says 600 coins. Ksiv Eaton David that it with 50 coins. Okay, it said. So how does he resolve this? He says Govim kol sheva sheva chamishim. What he meant, 50 coins meant 50 from each one. Shehein sheish meish shkalim. Akati kashan adadi. Because Hassam Kesef Hachazav. One says that it's silver, one says that it's gold. Ella Hachikam, rather, Rav explained it. Goiva Kesef Mishkal Sheish Me'ezav. He collected silver the amount of 600 gold coins. So yeah, it was a different material, but that was its value. Still didn't get the difference between Rebbe. No, gold is heavier.
Gold is heavier.
Yeah.
Worth more.
No, it meant that he collected from each shevet the amount of silver that would equal to 600 gold coins.
Yeah, but math doesn't make sense. 50 times 12, that's 600. But we're starting with silver, X's, and then we're ending the Y is gold.
So the 50 coins would be the value. Would be the value of 50 gold coins. It wasn't just 50 plain silver coins, big silver coins.
That's why I was asking the weight.
Oh. Yeah.
Giant like dollars, silver
So
dollars that were worth
so,
50
right.
times.
I just want to see how they explain this machlekes. Something. Just a second. 19. Let's give it only to the place of the altar. Okay, there's some little differences between each one, depending on the girsais here. Okay. Rolling by Kachim Kalim. Kachim Kalim Nechalim. You see that? It's like 12 lines from the bottom, let's say. 10 lines from the bottom. Kachim Kalim Nechalim B'chol Machane Yisrael. Said that once the Mishkan was established, then the sacrifices could be eaten anywhere in the Jewish camp. Amar Rav Huna, what does the Mishnah mean when it said that? It says, B'chol Makayim Yisrael, anywhere where the Jewish people are found. Aval Machan Alehavi, but there didn't have to be specifically a camp. Actually, the Shittik Mitzvah takes it out. Eisvei Rav Nachman Rav Huna. Rav Nachman asked Rav Huna this following question: what do you mean that they didn't have camps in the desert? It says exactly the opposite. It says that just like there were camps in the desert, so there were camps in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim Nahar Abayis, the city of Yerushalayim to the Temple Mount, that was called Machane Yisrael. That was called the Jewish camp. Me'ar Abayis L'Shar Nikanar, from that Temple Mount up to the gate of Nikanar. That was the gate with the 15 steps, the copper doors. That was called Machane Leviyah. Inside, after the gates of Nikanar, that was Machane Shechina. And all of this is considered this Inside is considered the enclosure that's was in the desert, Machne Shchina. So what does he mean that wherever they were was considered Machne Yisrael? That didn't have to be actually a camp. Alaima b'chol makei Machne Yisrael. As they would travel, the Machne Yisrael would be wherever they were. That would be the Machne Yisrael. So in other words, they could keep their kachim kalim sacrifice that they offered as they're walking, as they're moving, because that camp is moving with them. Where says Pshita, I could have thought that while they're traveling, maybe it's considered that it left the place and it becomes puzzle, Kamash Malan, that it doesn't become puzzle while they're traveling. Maybe it actually should become puzzle. It says that the tent of meeting will travel, even though it's traveling, it's still called Oyel Mayed, which means that it doesn't lose the status of the camp. Tanya.
I think what we're saying is, in other words, when they traveled, they packed up the Mishkan. So you might have thought it's in the suitcase, so there's no, therefore, El Moed technically, or Mach, or whatever you want to call it. So therefore, everything's outside automatically. But we're saying, no, it's still there. It's like another miracle of, like the Kosh Kedoshim, it's there, but it ain't there. That's so cool. Okay.
Tanya, I can't wait for you to give the share.
You don't listen anyway.
Tanya was starting to from Shimon Chayamer. Shimon Chay says, Oid Acheres Haisa. There was another camp in Yerushalayim, Bechel Ezras Nashimi. This was the women's quarter. But the person that's Tameh comes into there, they don't get kares like they came into the Azara. In Shilai, they only had 2 camps. Which camp wasn't in Shilai? Amar Rabba says, Rabba says probably they didn't have the middle one. They had the Machne Shchina, the Machne Yisrael, but they didn't have the Machne Leviyah. Yisrael Kadaitach Machne Leviyah Lehavi. I'm sorry. I said it wrong. They did have the Levi camp. Which one wasn't there? Rabbi says, I don't know which one wasn't there, but I know that they had the Levi camp. Because if you say they didn't have the Levi camp, when they would be sent out, the Tmei Mace is not allowed to be in Machne Shchina. And a Zav is not allowed to be in the Machne Leviyah. So if they didn't have the Levi camp, then if they were sent out from the Machne Shchina, where would the Tmei Mace be? Right outside the camp, right outside the Shchina. And where would the Zav be? Also right outside the Shchina camp. But the Torah says, it says that there has to be more than one camp. 10 Machanel Lezev, 10 Machanel Lezev. The Machaneim is plural. They need to have separate camps for the Tmei Mace and for the Zav. So obviously the Levi camp was there, so that the Tmei Mace would be allowed to be in the Levi camp. And the Zav would be allowed to be in the Yisrael camps. And the Levi has to be there. Amalei Rava, so Rava says to Rabba, it's the second time in this Masechta we have a conversation, Rava and Rabba. Rabbi says to Rabbi, rather, what do you want to say, Machne Yisrael, that we didn't have Machne Yisrael? They have to get rid of one camp, because it says in Shila they only had 2 camps. So what do you want to get rid of? Machne Yisrael? Then the Zav and the Mitzayra are going to be sent out, because the Zav is sent out of the Machne Leviyah, and the Mitzayra is sent out of Machne Yisrael. If there's no Machne Yisrael, then the Zav and the Mitzayra are going to be in the same place. But the Torah says he has to sit alone. So Yeshiv Tami Amcharim, that no one else is supposed to be with the Mitzayra. Ella Elam Kulit Lasa. Rather, we have to say that in Shilai they did have all the camps. What does it mean that they didn't have, that they only had 2 camps? It means 2 camps would absorb people that killed B'Shegeg. Talking about something else. Michlal, they never have a cult of Machne Leviyah.
Why can't you just answer Bada Yeshev? Yeah, it's true that he'll dwell in isolation. But when they're moving, he can't be Yoshev because they're Holech. And when they're Holech, that's when you don't have Machne Shechina. But the moment they stop, then you have it, and then he can be Yoshev.
So we're referring to in Shiloh. This is in the Mishkan that had the stone walls, but no roof.
Okay.
No solid roof.
Oh, so this is no longer travel.
It's not in the desert. We're talking about that over there. They were missing something from the. So we're saying, what were they missing? So we said that if they're missing this camp, then how do that pasuk word missing that camp? Then how does that pasuk work? So Rabbi says. That they're all three camps they had in Shiloh. So what does it mean that there are only two camps? They only had two camps to Klita to absorb. Mechlal the b'midbar havi kol tamachin alavia. What he means. So if you look back at the statement, it says. In Yerushalayim they had another camp. That's the Ezra's Nashim. And you wouldn't be punished for that. In Shiloh they only had two camps. We didn't know what this is talking about. Now we're saying it's talking about like a Ari Miklat. So it says, what would that imply? That in the desert, and the Machane Levia was that they did have an Ari Miklat in the desert. What would be the Ari Miklat? It would be the Machane Levia, the camp of the Levium, just like when they came to Eretz Yisrael, the cities of refuge were the cities of Levium were also the cities of refuge. It says in Tanya, we even learned this in a brisa. It says, "V'samti l'chamakim, I'll give you a place that you could run. V'chayecha, even while you're alive. Makim mekaimcha, the place where you are. V'samti l'cha makim, I'll give you a place for the people to run. That'd be the place where Moshe Rabbeinu is, which was Machane Levia." It says in the pasuk Ashiyanas Shama that the person that kills by mistake will run there. Melamed shemegalin b'midbar, shemaglin b'midbar. That even in the desert they had to go into exile. Leichan Goylan, where would he go? L'Machane Levia. Kanamar ben Levi Sharag. From this they explain that let's say it was a Levi that killed. So then where would he go? Because he's already in the Machane Levia, in the camp of the Levi. It says Goylan miplach l'plach. He goes from one city in the of the Levi to another city of the Levim. From Golal Pilchai, and if he goes to the city of that he lived in, Pilchai Kalte, it actually works. Yeah. Mikra. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Or what's the source where we have this that he can go from city to city? Even if he ends up in the same city that he lived before, it still absorbs him. It still protects him. What does it mean there were two machanes for Klita in Shiloh? Oh. Going back to the original teretz, we said that in Shiloh they didn't have three camps. And we said, no, in Shiloh actually they did have three camps. What did Rabbi Yechanan mean that there were only two camps? It meant there were two camps that absorbed.
Refugee to a killer.
Yeah, but what does it mean there were two camps there? Two camps. What does it mean? Why two camps?
Lead to one of the 48 Levites in Transjordan, proper plus 42 other Levites city to escape the wrath.
Where's the two camps?
The Levite camp surrounding the temple of Tabernacle was also afforded that's what they're saying. They're counting the Levium right around as well as the Aramic ones.
I guess the way Dr. Stein is explaining to me that the two camps that we said was the Levium that were right around the Mishkan.
That's how I'm reading it.
Okay.
English.
It sounds like only one camp would sure.
I take it back. In regard to Shiloh, however, the Brisa teaches there were only two camps. That is, the designation of the Levite camp did not exist insofar as affording refuge to killers, although it existed in regard to the laws of banishing Tumim. I'm totally confused. Take it away, Rabbi.
My loyhabil stem machanes laklita, refuge to a killer. So it says the law is that one who kills a person inadvertently is required to flee to the 48 Levite cities. Plus, that's the okay. As the Gemara will teach presently, the Levite camp surrounding the temple or tabernacle also afforded the killer refuge. In regard to Shiloh, however, the Brisa teaches that there are only two camps. The designation of the Levite camp did not exist insofar as affording refuge to killers.
So it's counting a double, the same camp.
The reason for this distinction is not clear. As the location of the Israelite camp at Shiloh.
Could it be that it's counting the place camp double because it absorbs non-Levites?
Not sure. Okay. Bola Gilgal, they came to Gilgal. Gilgal was the after Shiloh. They came to this other place, to Gilgal. They came. This is when they first came to Eretz Yisrael. They went to Gilgal before Shiloh, right? This is before Shiloh, I think. Not even Givon. Givon was after Shiloh. This is before Shiloh. So in the desert, they weren't allowed to have private altars. When they came to Gilgal, they were allowed to have private altars. Tana Rabbana, kol nidar v'nidav, anything that's donated, whether it's donated by saying, this is a sacrifice, or saying, I'm accepting on myself a sacrifice, hayakar babama, such sacrifices could be offered on a private altar. If it's not a sacrifice that's donated, in other words, it's an obligation sacrifice, like a sin offering or a guilt offering, ain't kar babama, you can't bring it on a bama, you have to actually schlep to the main place, to the and offer it over there. Then it's or you have to wait until one is built. Now, mincha unaziris kraven bebama. This opinion holds. This is called the Tanakama, the first view, that a mincha, which means a meal offering, and the carbon of a nazir could be brought on a bama, because those are things that are donated. Now, why is the nazir donated? The nazir, it's an obligation for him to bring this out. Well, he decided that he's going to be a nazir, so that was all his decision. Once it's decided, it becomes an obligation, but it's nevertheless, we're viewing it as it's his decision. Like Karvu Yachid Ela Oilus Islam Bilvad. I'm sorry, the first opinion we said was Divrei Reb Meir. That was Reb Meir. Like Karvu Yachid Ela Oilus Islam Bilvad. That on these altars, private altars, it was only burnt offerings and peace offerings, but not mincha, and not a carbon of a nasir. Rabbi Daimer, kol shatzibar vayachid makrivim bayil ma'id midbar. Anything that the congregation or an individual could bring in the tabernacle in the desert, kravim bayil ma'id begilgal. That had to be brought, and the oil in the tent of meeting that was set up in Gilgal. He held that the oil ma'id, wherever it is the same. They said, according to Reb Meir, the individuals weren't bringing their sacrifices in Gilgal in the Bama Gedailah. They said ein karav bebama. They meant whether it's a small altar or a big altar. The Rabbi Yehuda is saying no, that on the big altar they were allowed to bring it on the big bama. What's the difference between the two? According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's they weren't allowed to have other private altars. But when they came to Gilgal, then they were allowed to have private altars, and which is called small altars. and on his small altar that he had on the top of his roof, Rabbi Yehuda says that he could only bring on that private altar an oila and the shlamim. The Chachamim say, Kol Shatzibar Makrivim Ba'il Mayid Shebemidbar Makrivim Ba'il Mayid Shebegilgal. Anything that they could bring in the desert, they could bring in Gilgal. However, private things, they did not bring in Gilgal. V'kan, whether it's in the desert or whether it's in Gilgal, Likarvu Yachid, Allah Shlamim Bilvad. They could only bring the oila and the shlamim. Now, that statement, you have the opinion of Reb Meir that you could even bring minaches, a carbon mincha and a benazir. And on the public altar, that was on private altars. That's the Reb Meir. On the public altar, they would bring only community sacrifices, no private sacrifices. The Chachamim, regarding the public altar, they hold the same like Reb Meir. But regarding the private altar, they hold that we're not allowed to bring the mincha and nazir. So, in other words, the machlekes Reb Meir and the Chachamim is regarding the private altar, what you were allowed to bring on the private altar. The Reb Meir was more accepting of the carbon mincha on the private altar. Then Rabbi Yehuda holds, like the Chachamim regarding the private altar, that you're only allowed to bring an oila and shlamim. But he argues on the Chacham and Rameir about the Bamas Tibur. He holds that you're allowed to bring private sacrifices on the community altar. Yes, there's a lot of mixing over here. Mix and match. Reb Shimon says, Af Tzibale Yakrivu, even the community only brought Elab Sachim v'Chayvish Shekvolam Zman, only the very the most significant ones where they had set times. Those are the sacrifices that were brought. So, for example, holiday sacrifices, etc. But if there would have been a sacrifice that the community needed to bring because they did a sin, that wouldn't be brought in Gilgal. Only something that was kavul lemzman, only something that has a designated time. My time of the Reb Meir. Go back to explain Reb Meir. What's the reason for Reb Meir? Reb Meir held that you can bring even carbon mincha on the private altar and a nasir damakra leisas and kachal shanach leis payayim. You're not allowed to do what every person is doing today. Each one, what's correct in his eyes. Amna Meishli Yisrael. This is talking about them when they come into the land of Israel. You won't be able to just bring sacrifices the way you do now. Amna Meishli Yisrael ki alis alaretz. Moshe says to the Jewish people, when you come into the land, Yisharais, like it says Ishkala Yashar. Any man what's upright in his eyes. Karbanas that are yashar, which means things that are donated. Takrivo, that you're allowed to bring. Chayvais, but obligations, like takrivo, that you're not allowed to bring on private altars. Private altars can only get donations. And menachas and nazirs, yashar's nino. Reb Meir's opinion is that included in donation offerings are meal offerings and also the offering of a nazir, because he decides if he wants to be a nazir. Right? So that's considered a donation. Rabbanan, they hold ein mincha bebama. There's no mincha on a bama, even if it's a bama gedola. In Naziris chayvus, and they hold that a nazir is considered an obligation. Why is it an obligation? Because once he took the vow, then he has obligations. Yeah, you look at it after the fact. Amar Shmuel says that this machlekes between Rameh and Chachamim is machlekes bechatas v'asham. This is a machlekes about the chatas and the asham of the nazir. Aval ba'ilas shlamim, but the oila and the shlamim that the nazir have to bring, divrei kol yisharis, and everyone holds that those are considered upright. Those are considered donation offerings for kirbi, and they could be brought. Moisiv Rabbah. So Rabbah has a question. It says chazav v'sheik v'chumas lachmi taida. It says that the chest and the leg, the thigh of a shlamim offering goes to the kayan, and also the bread of a taida, v'chumas lachmi taida, also the breads of a Thanksgiving offering, they also go to the kayan. It applies if you bring this to the main altar, but not on private altars. Now, but when it talks about the ram that a nazir brought, that was a type of shlamim. Over there, it doesn't mention any kshari. The Brisa doesn't tell me if it's brought on a private altar or anything. What's the reason why it doesn't mention it? Because it wasn't brought on a private altar. That's why. No. Yeah, we're going to learn that, I think, increases. Wait a little bit. Yeah, if we say that they're arguing about the oil and the shlamim, Rameh and the chachamim, if it's brought on the bamaktana, so then we would say that this price that doesn't mention anything about the shlamim of the nazir. It says it doesn't mention if it was brought. That's because it would be the rabbanan that say that the shlamim was not brought. That's why it doesn't mention it. But if they say that they only argue about the chatas and asham, right? That's all machlekes. But when it comes to the shlamim, everyone agrees that it's brought. Hamani. Then who would this price be that doesn't mention about the ram going to the kohen? Everyone holds that that it's brought. Rather, we're going to have to say it a little different. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says this was a statement from Shmuel. Machlekes by l'shlamim. The machlekes actually by l'ilin shlamim. Chatzis v'ashim derekel cheves ninav lekarbe. Exactly the opposite. The l'ilin shlamim is the machlekes. We have the whole totally different svara here. It's not because you took a vow, you didn't take a vow. It's all your donation. It has to do with the oil and the shlamim are always considered donations, no matter what. And as opposed to the chatas and asham, which are considered chayvas, obligatory offerings, and those are not brought on the private altar. Amar Mar. So we learned the Chacham say kol shatzib makriven ba'il, anything that the congregation would bring in the desert that could also be brought in Gilgal in the new Mishkan that was set up. My tamar the Rabbanan. What's the reason for the Rabbanan that they would bring communal sacrifices in Gilgal? Amakra Yesha Bein Aviyasa says that a man can do what's in the desert. A man could do anything that he wanted, anything that was upright. So, when they come to Gilgal, so it says like this: Ish. That means an individual Yesharasu Delikrit. He's able to bring his donation offerings. We're talking about in the desert. Chayva is Slay Likriv, but he can't bring his obligation offerings. But this must be talking about not in the desert. This must be talking about in Gilgal, that they had to wait until the Mishkan Shiloh was set up. There was a time when a person was not able to bring his obligation offerings. He could only bring his donation offerings, and during those years, the first 14 years of the conquering, he had to wait. Obligatory offerings. Okay. But the tzibur was allowed to bring it on the Bava Megadela. Rabbi Yehuda, what is in there? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is Rabbi Yehuda held that an individual was allowed to bring his sacrifices on the community altar. He says, Amalach kiksiv hayashar be'enav diksiv. What does it say? Yashar be'enav. That means only on his own altar would be a problem, but on the community altar he'd be allowed. Bama Gedaila, then over there, afilu chayvas nami likra. Then on the community altar you're allowed to even bring obligation offering. Gemara says, Ella, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Haksiv, Ish, it says only, which we understood them to mean a private individual. Lav Lameimra, the Ish Yishar Sid Likr, Vachayvas Le Likr, that an individual is only allowed to bring Nadarim and Nadavas, which means his voluntary offerings, but he's not allowed to bring his obligatory offerings. it's trying to imply that because we have a distinction between the small altar and the large altar, so then it has to be that when it's telling me something about the individual, it has to be telling me something about what he's allowed to bring. It can't be telling me about what the community is allowed to bring, because the community never brings anything on the small altar. So it must be telling me that the individual is not allowed, the individual that has the option of the small altar or the large altar, it's coming to tell me that the individual is not allowed to bring his obligatory offerings on the large altar, which contradicts Rabbi Yehuda, who says that he is allowed to. Umar says, Tiksevish lahachshes azar. That implication that you get from Ish, that he's only on his private altar, he's not allowed to bring. But on the let me read it from your commentary. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that even an individual may bring obligatory offerings on a communal bama. He says, in reference to what is the limiting expression, what is proper written, you're allowed to bring it. It's referring to in his eyes. That means on the private one. On bama gedayla, you are allowed to bring it.
Bama gedayla refers to the
Mishkan and Gilgal. Yeah. Al-Haksiv Ish. But what does it mean, each man? Does this expression not come to say that for a man, an individual, it is only proper offerings which he may be brought, which means the donations. But obligatory offerings may not be brought for him at all, even at a major bama. Umar says, okay, so 2, if the intention of the Torah was not to forbid an individual from bringing obligatory offerings even in a major bama, why did the Torah write the expression each man at all? Let the Torah write only the expression what is proper. Since this expression is immediately followed by the expression in his eyes, which denotes a minor bama, I would on my own apply the restrictions against offering obligatory sacrifices only to the individual. For he is only one empowered to offer sacrifice on a minor bama. Oh, so because it says be'enav, so I know automatically that we're talking about a private. Be'enav means on the private altar. So I know I have to be talking about an individual because the public never brings anything on private altars. The public only brings on the public altar. So why does it have to say the word ish? So therefore, wants to say that Ish is probably telling me that he should not be allowed to bring anything at all on any obligatory offering. The individual. Umar says no. It's coming to teach me. It's coming to tell me that when the service is being done on a private altar, you do not need a kohen. Umar says Zar. That to include a non-kohen, that I know, that I know that when it comes to the Mizbeach of Hashem, when it comes to the temple, so over there I need to have a kohen. But if it's not in the temple, then I don't need a kohen. So I have another source for this. I don't have to learn it from the pasuk of Ish that says Ma'u Detema. I could have thought, if it didn't say the word Ish, I could have thought Libai Kiddush B'Cheres K'Mikar. I could have thought that even though you don't need a kohen, because I know that I only need a kohen for the temple, but I could have thought I still need a bechar, like it used to be outside the temple. Kamash Malan, I don't even need a bechar. I can use anyone. Now the Gemara asks, yeah, that's their sacrifice. Chachamim, Hainu Tanakama. The Chachamim, which is the view in the Mishnah that said, Chachamim Maimrim, anything that was brought in the tent of meeting was also brought in Gilgal. Anything that was brought in the desert was also brought in Gilgal. That's exactly the same opinion as the Tanakama. They also said anything that was in the tent of meeting brought in Gilgal, which is only Tanakama. Oh no, there's 2 Chachamim. The one is only Oila in Shlamim. They both of them said that you're only allowed to bring, that an individual is only allowed to bring an Oila in Shlamim on the private altars. about on the public altars? Mayor. You're bringing flavors to Sibur. Okay. So now the Gemara asks, L'chera they hold the same thing, that there was only individual was only allowed to bring donation offerings. Actually, the difference between them is not in which sacrifices they're allowed to offer, but the difference between them is whether they have secondary libations that came along with the offerings. So according to the Tanakama, they would bring Nesachim even in Gilgal, just the same way they were brought in the desert. And according to the Tanakama, they would not. Okay.
Who
Let's
said
go
they
to
can?
the Chachamim are adding on to what the Tanakama held. The Chachamim say that they could. Yeah. Shimon said, Amar Mar, we learned before that Reb Shimon said that they would only bring the carbon Pesach and anything that had a designated time. My time of the Reb Shimon. What's the reason for Reb Shimon that was so restricting even on the community? It says, Diksiv, Vayasa b'nei Yisrael sepesach b'Gilgal. Pasuk says that the Jewish people brought the carbon Pesach when they were in Gilgal, when they came to that spot right over the Yarden. Pshita, obviously they brought it. Allah Kamash Malan is coming to tell us the Chayvus Ken Pesach. That actually that's the only thing that they brought, and only obligatory offerings that are similar to the carbon Pesach through the Karev. The Chayvus Ken Pesach, the Karev. Halav Ken Pesach. But if they were not like a carbon Pesach, which means that they did not have a designated time, like Karev, then it wasn't brought. The Idach. So what does everyone else hold? That's an interesting point. When it says that the Jewish people brought the Pesach in Gilgal, they say Mibai Leila Kid Rabbi Yechanan. They need it for what Rabbi Yechanan says, because Rabbi Yechanan taught that says, Damar Rabbi Yechanan Mishum Rabbi Bena Oral Mekabel Hazar. If someone is an Oral and he doesn't have a circumcision, but he also became Tamei Mace. He also became contaminated with the corpse. So you're allowed to sprinkle on him the blood of the Paraduma for him to become pure. The blood, not the blood, the ashes of the Paraduma. Thank you. Now, when were the Jewish people circumcised? No, they would sprinkle on the third day and on the seventh day. What is it? What would he skip? No, it's not talking about he's converting. Not talking about his converting. He's talking about that he didn't have a circumcision. He's a Jewish person. He didn't have a circumcision. Yeah. So Rabbi Yechanan knows this. This is very interesting. Rabbi Yechanan knows that you can sprinkle the blood, not the blood, the ashes, sorry, on an aral. He says, how do we know this? He says, because when the Jewish people came to Gilgal, they made the Korban Pesach. When would their circumcision have taken place? Would have taken place on Yud Aleph Nisan, Rebbe's birthday. Because they crossed over the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan. Don't get confused with Yud Aleph Nisan back then, 3,000 years ago. So they crossed over the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan. They didn't have the circumcision that day. They had the circumcision the next day on Yud Aleph. Now, you have to wait 3 days in between the sprinkling. They sprinkled the blood on the third day, and they sprinkled not the blood. They sprinkled the ashes on the third day, and sprinkled the ashes on the seventh day. So the second sprinkling would have been on the 15th, right? This is 40 years later, right? This is the new generation. that wasn't circumcised in the desert and now getting circumcised right when they crossed over the Jordan. So how could they have offered if it would have been on the if the circumcision was on the 11th, so then you would need 12, 13, 14, and then on the 15th you would sprinkle again. The problem is the Korban Pesach needed to be brought on the 14th, not on the 15th. So they couldn't have been brought the Korban Pesach. It has to be that you were able to sprinkle the ashes even on someone that didn't have the circumcision. They were able to start before. So okay. Tani Tana Kameder of Ada Barava. Ein bein bama gedoyla labama ktana ela Pesach v'chevis hakavua lem zman. The only difference between a big bama and a small bama is the Korban Pesach and other sacrifices that have a designated time. That these types of sacrifices are brought on a bama gedoyla only on the large altar, Korban Pesach. No private altars for designated time offerings. However, if it would be a obligatory offering that didn't have a designated time, it would not even be brought on a bama gedolah, but it wasn't brought at all. That's Reb Shimon's opinion. So Amar Lei, let's skip the parentheses. Amar Lei, Ravada Barabba says to that student, there was a student that was teaching this, he says, T'targem asnisa, ba'olas chayva. You have to explain your brisa that you're saying that you need to have a designated time. That would be like a Korban Tamid or a Korban Musaf. But it's not referring to the chatas, oilas chayva, only specifically the oilas chayva, not just plain chayva. Because the korban chatas, for example, the goats that were brought on the holidays would not be brought dik oilas nedava, because there are oilas nedava that are brought on the private altar. The Korban Pesach is not brought on a private altar. Obligations they're only brought on the public altar. Obligations that have a designated time are also brought. Let me read this from your commentary. Okay, so we have a student that's teaching in front of Rav Ada Barava. There's no difference between the offerings brought on a major bama and on a minor bama, except for the Pesach offering, the obligatory offering that have fixed times. They're only brought on a major bama, not on a minor. So, Amar Lei, Rav Ada Barava, he said to him, explain your brisa, which teaches that obligatory to offerings having a fixed time may be brought on a major bama is specifically obligatory oila. The ikka oilas nedaba, for there exists a corresponding donated oila that is brought on a minor bama. Okay, so now the contrast is going to be oila. That oila that's a donation is on a minor one. Oila that's not a donation, that's an obligatory, is going to be on the major, only on the right. That's going to be the chatas. For if it would be talking about a chatas, there's no such thing as a chatas nedava. So we're trying to say the difference between donation versus obligatory. That distinction is only in an oila, not in a chatas. Gemara says v'luk mei b'minchas chayva, but let's say it's talking about a korban mincha, the chavitin, because there's an obligatory chavitin, which is the Kohen Gadol's obligatory offering. It says kasavrein mincha babam. He says that's not even doesn't come into play over here, because there's no such thing as a korban mincha by a bama. So there's only the only option that we can have to make a distinction between one sacrifice that's a donation or obligatory would be the korban oila. Okay, let's leave it over here. Yeah. Okay, have a good day, everyone.